blights at the White House, saying you're going to push back against the president and the EPA on coal. And we've heard similar messages from the governor, now Senator Joe Manchin, Congressman Ray Hall, who's a senior Democrat in the House, Governor Tomlin, all in the House, Governor Tomlin, all office holders, all Democrats, many of them with senior status. Why should West Virginians believe that you will be successful as a new person in Washington where Manchin, Ray Hall, and Tomlin, members of your own party, have not been successful?
Well, Hoppy, thank you for that question. And I did have that commercial, and it got some attention from a lot of folks, including the president. And that's what it was meant to do. Because whether the president believes it or not, coal is still 40% of the electricity in this country and more than 90% here in West Virginia. And I have been endorsed by the United Mine Workers of America, the coal miners. The coal miners endorse me because they trust me to help save their jobs. They know that I have a plan to save their jobs, and that's what I've done, is challenge the president to invest the $8 billion that we have in the Department of Energy to have retrofitting our coal-fired power plants. That's one way to save our jobs. That's why the coal miners have endorsed me. They've also endorsed me because they know that I will stand up for their health, their safety, and their pensions. They know that Congresswoman Capito was the only member of the West Virginia delegation to vote against the Robert C. Byrd Coal Mine Safety Act. They know that she also voted to cut mine inspectors in a dangerous budget that she continues to vote for. The coal miners also endorse me because they know that I will stand up to the EPA, just as I did a couple months ago when I marched through the streets with 6,000 UMWA workers and electrical workers, showing our voices and marching against the EPA and President Obama. And that's how I'm going to make a difference, Hoppy.
Congresswoman Capito, your response, 60 seconds.
My response is that my opponent has supported the president that's putting West Virginians out of jobs. And that's exactly what she would do when she would go to Washington. She supported him twice in his election. She gave money to his inauguration. Mrs. Obama says that we need Secretary Tennant to continue the president's agenda on health care and guns, and certainly coal as well. So I don't think that while she went to Washington to try to talk to the EPA and came home and the explanation was we have a failure to communicate. I'll stand strong on my record of defending West Virginia coal. We have passed bill after bill out of the House, and the obstructionism of President Obama and Harry Reid, who supports my opponent's campaign, stops us at every point. And the only way to change this is to change our voice in the Senate, is to elect a senator who created the Coal Caucus, who stands up, who stood for miners in the Miner Act, Mine Safety Act, and who knows that this administration is out to destroy us and our jobs.
Congresswoman Capito, the next question is to you. You have repeatedly assailed, as you just did, the Obama administration and talked about the job-killing regulations that are imposed. Figures from the West Virginia University Bureau of Business Economic Research show that in 2000, the year you were first elected to the House, West Virginia was 49th in per capita income. That same agency reports in 2013, we're still 49th. Now, you blame the EPA and this administration, but hasn't there been economic stagnation that's occurred under Democrat and Republican administrations and during your term? So why should West Virginians believe 6 years in the Senate will be different than your 14 years in the Congress?
Well, I think, Hoppy, that you have to account for the last 6 years where the president and his policies have absolutely riddled our economy here in West Virginia. We've lost 7,000 coal mining jobs. And if you do the multiplier effect that Cecil Roberts himself from the UMWA uses, a 4 job for every coal mining jobs, that's 28,000 West Virginians who are out of work. Talk to the alpha miner. When we see the policies that have moved forward, we have a health care bill that is moving us to a part-time economy. 63% of those part-time jobs are women. Our salaries are going down. Our expendable energy, our expendable dollars are going down. I mean, we're spending more on energy, more on health care, more uncertainty because of the policies that my opponent supports, that President Obama supports. Now, I can't sit here and say everything was rosy for the first 8 years, but certainly these last 6 years have devastated West Virginia, and it concerns me greatly.
Secretary Tennant, rebuttal?
Yes, Hoppy, thank you. Congresswoman Capito said in her opening statement, these are her words, we need a Washington that works for us. we were darn tootin' we needed Washington that works for us. She's been there for 14 years. That's why it's time to send me to the United States Senate. And as Congresswoman sits here and tells you what she'll do, well, what has she done for the last 14 years? You know, the coal miners know and are behind me in this race, Hoppy. They have endorsed me, the United Mine Workers of America, because they know that I will stand up for them. When she talks about these coal miners, does she talk to them and say that she has hurt them, she has hurt their safety by voting against a Coal Mine Safety Act in the wake of the UBB tragedy in 2010, that she has voted to cut funding to the black lung benefits, $1 million, hurting more than 2,000 coal miners? And how about Patriot Coal? When Patriot Coal filed for bankruptcy, the coal miners rallied. I stood shoulder to shoulder with those retirees trying to fight for their health care benefits and their pensions. And where was Congresswoman Capito? She wasn't standing up beside the coal miners. She was going behind their backs and taking checks from the Patriot executives, the same ones who were trying to slash their pensions. So I will stand for the coal miners, and Congresswoman Capito has not stood up for the coal miners because the most important part of coal is the coal miner.
Congresswoman Capito would like to use one of her two challenges.
Yes, I would, because I think this is a myth that my opponent keeps pushing forward onto the media and otherwise. Let's start with black lung. I have been a supporter of the black lung. I'm alarmed at the increase in black lung that was discovered in the last study, and I've been very supportive. I joined with Senator Manchin, Congressman Rahal, Congressman McKinley to convince the President Obama, who was going to cut the $1 million from the black lung program, the President that my opponent has supported was going to cut the black lung program. I joined with my fellow colleagues to do that.
Okay. Let me continue on the economic front, and let me get into regulations, the leadership, and the impact on the state's economy. Secretary Tennant, the question is for you. In an ad you ran last week statewide, which you approved, the announcer says, quote, on the Financial Services Committee, where Congresswoman Capito sits, she helps bankers get rich. The ad goes on to say, while West Virginians were losing their jobs to Wall Street, she gave her husband, a Wall Street banker, inside tips, and they made more than $100,000. You've said that Capito personally benefited from her position in Congress. What precisely did Capito do as a member of Congress to enrich herself and her husband? And are you implying that Congresswoman Capito is corrupt?
I am saying that Congresswoman Capito broke the trust of West Virginians, because this is what this is about. This is about the trust that the people of West Virginia deserve to have in their elected officials. Now, Congresswoman Capito serves on a committee that is supposed to oversee banks, at the same time protect customers and consumers at the same time. And the Charleston Gazette had the headline right out in black and white where it says that whether they're large or small, Capito tends to side with banks. Well, that's breaking the trust of West Virginians, because if she's siding with banks, then she's not siding with West Virginians. And even Politico magazine stated that Wall Street lobbyists say that Congresswoman Capito is their go-to person. Well, who is your go-to person? I'll be your go-to person. I'll stand up for you and your families, and I will fight for the kind of future that you want for your children.
Just a point of clarification, which I do have the ability to do. Did she and her husband, as you said, personally benefit from her position in Congress?
Yes, from our own financial filings, you can see that she made money. Because here's the point, and here's the fact. The Congresswoman will agree on this, because Congress has access to information that regular West Virginians don't have access to. And the fact is that during the financial crisis, West Virginians were losing their retirement, they were losing their savings and their homes, and Congresswoman Capito was making money.
Congresswoman Capito, your response?
Well, these kind of personal attacks that are unfounded, untrue, undocumented, and unable to have any kind of factual basis. Supposedly, the person that she's using as her factual basis says, I wasn't at the supposed meeting and I didn't have insider information. This is just a desperate attack by a desperate candidate who wants to shift the conversation away from jobs, education, health care, energy, all the things that West Virginians are tuning in tonight to talk about. And so I'm just not surprised, because I understand that she'll do anything and say anything to get elected. You want to talk about trust. I've built 18 years of trust with West Virginians. They know me. They know my family. I don't appreciate my family being attacked. That's not a West Virginia value. And I'm going to stand up and fight that. And I just think that the personal attacks were just despicable. And I would like to ask the Secretary tonight if she would stop with the nasty personal attacks and let's talk about the issues.
Congresswoman,
may I use a challenge?
You can use a challenge, sure.
I can use a challenge,
right.
I think so. Thank you very much. Well, first off, what is she talking about, a meeting that she's talking about? I never mentioned a meeting, so I'm not sure. There's no mention of a meeting in my ad, and I'm not sure what she's talking about, but I think she just confirmed that Congress has access that West Virginians don't have access to. And the Center for Public Integrity called you Wall Street's secret weapon. Wall Street's secret weapon. And sure, you want to stop the personal ads? I believe that you were the one who began the personal ads back in July.
Okay, so Congresswoman Capito, let me put the next question to you. Your opponent has criticized you, as we've just heard, of being too cozy with the banks and the financial industry. And you counter by saying you voted against the bank bailout twice. However, you voted against the Pay for Performance Act of 2009 that was aimed at controlling what many believe were the excessive bonuses that bankers received while they were getting taxpayer bailout money. Why should financial companies that made poor decisions and then were saved by the taxpayers be able to reward bad behavior with big bonuses?
Well, I want to point out that when the big banks came knocking, I voted no twice. I was the only member of the West Virginia delegation that voted no twice to the big banks to say no bailout. And I have been fighting this in committee, too big to fail. We cannot bail out financial institutions. I also voted to tax any bonus that may possibly come forward at 90%. The bill that you're talking about and the statements that I made at the time was a very broad-based bill, not just executives that are getting bonus, but somebody in a local office that might be an administrative person would be penalized. Well, I didn't think that was fair. They had no bearings in the Wall Street debacle. But you know what I'm going to defend? I'm going to defend the West Virginia community banks and the West Virginia credit unions. We need to have a full financial system here in the state that doesn't include big banks, that includes ability to get a car, to get a mortgage, to afford to go to school. All these things, I've looked out for our community banks and our credit unions in West Virginia, and I'll stand by that because that's important to West Virginia.
Secretary Tennant, your response?
Well, Congresswoman Capito says that she voted twice against the bailout. She's correct about that when they came knocking, she voted against the bailout. But they kept coming, Hoppy. And they kept coming, and they knocked again. And not only did she open the door, she left the door wide open and voted twice to give our taxpayers' dollars to those CEOs in the form of those bonuses. Now, that's a distinction here. I saved taxpayers' money. I gave back $3 million and gave it back to the taxpayers while the Congresswoman is giving money to the CEOs. And here are West Virginians. Let's talk about West Virginians. West Virginians are suffering. They deserve a pay raise too. They deserve a little bonus also. Why don't we increase minimum wage? I'm for increasing minimum wage for the West Virginia workers and not worry about the profits before our West Virginia workers, the profits of Wall Street before our West Virginia workers.
Secretary Tennant, next question's to you. You have argued for expanded unemployment benefits. You issued a release last April when the Senate voted to restore federal funding for extended jobless benefits. You said in your words, economic experts agree that extending unemployment insurance would be a boon for the economy, generating economic growth and increasing consumer spending. If that's true, if the economic principles behind that argument are solid, why not extend jobless benefits for even longer to even more people and generate even more economic growth? What's the economic principle behind your argument?
Well, first off, when you talk about unemployed West Virginians, I think about unemployed West Virginians, and I think about the Met workers, those in the northern panhandle who lost their jobs. The company was over, the business was over right across the river, but in Wetzel County, a lot of the employees and the impact that it has on the economy in West Virginia. So I think about our unemployed. I am worried about our coal miners who've received those warrant notices. And so ORMET folks